want to talk to you today a little bit about the book of Job. I find it fascinating, I find it difficult to read, and I find it very interesting that it is arguably one of the most controversial books in the Bible. Controversial because it deals with a very difficult question. Why do the righteous suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? It's a question that's occupied the thinking of sages and scholars for millennia, and especially in the Jewish world. Understandably so, because I think we would all agree, in our human thinking at least, the Jewish people have undergone much more than their share of suffering. And so the question is repeatedly asked, why? Why do the righteous suffer? Now there are those in both the Jewish and Christian community whose conventional view is that they suffer because they've sinned. Suffering is punitive. And the other side of that coin says that piety and righteousness are always rewarded. And we know that on some level there is some truth to what they're saying, because in books like Proverbs, for instance, those themes are interwoven throughout. And it's certainly what Job's friends believed when they made their long-winded and somewhat pompous speeches. It was clear that they believed Job was suffering because he had sinned. But Job just couldn't wrap his mind around that. He could not accept it. And I don't believe it was because he was being self-righteous. I think it was because of his remarkable trust and faith in a God of love. A God of love that he had served with obedience. A God of love who just simply would not have inflicted this horror on him and on his family. And when he gets a chance to actually confront that God, he does it with chutzpah. And God's response is remarkable. A few chapters actually of wisdom and teaching and profundity and power and beauty and no answer. There's no answer for Job. Not once does God say, okay, Job, you want to know why? Here's why. But as you encounter Job's response to God's words, you see that at some point, in some way, something that God said touched his heart. It's though a light bulb went off. And Job's attitude changes. He is filled with humility. He becomes repentant. And I think probably what Job recognized somehow in what God was saying is the depth of selflessness that is a part of righteousness. Where righteousness is, there is no thought about tangible reward. There's no thinking about personal gain. There's only selflessness, humility, obedience, and a desire to be in the presence of God. A life of righteousness is a life of obedience, lived to honor God. For that reason alone, to honor God. Now, we all have needs. I know that. We have families to feed, and we have bills to pay, and we have illnesses to overcome. But God says we should bring them to Him. And as righteous followers, we bring those needs to Him with every confidence that He will hear and He will respond. The problem comes when that obedient lifestyle becomes contingent on the right answer. Then righteousness is lost. I think it's fascinating that at the end of the book, everything and more is restored to Job. So the question could be asked, did God reward him after all? And I don't think that's what we have here. I think we have a truly righteous man, a humble man, a man living an obedient life to honor God for that reason alone, that it honors God. And we have that God, our God, doing what He always does, and that's blessing. So I think in reading Job, I've had the wrong focus. And next time I read it, instead of focusing on the suffering and the unanswered question, I want to focus on the relationship. I want to dig in and understand the relationship that existed between Job and God. I want to really understand the remarkable trust, despite all that was happening, that Job had in God. And I want for myself the unshakable and beautiful trust that God had in Job. I think that's what the story is really all about.